Yes, this item is under DCA. This regulatory package is under DCA final review. I think just for some quick context, I think a lot of people know this, but it helps me to shift what we're doing here. We've moved from state laws and state codes from the last agenda item, and we're now in agency-made law regulations, which have an extensive process that Danny helps us with. This item here, it's a procedural request of the board, not a substantive request of the board. And by that I mean the language on 24 and 25. The board's already approved that, and this language isn't changing today. What we're asking help with is right in the middle of page 23. Our motion in June of 2019 says the word initiate the rulemaking process. We did that, and we haven't had any public comments, and the language hasn't changed, and so the rules require us to come back to the board and ask for authorization to finalize the process. So you'll see in the bottom of page 23 the word complete. We've gone from initiate, now we're asking for permission to complete the process, and that's what this agenda item is about.
Motion to finalize the regulation.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to finalize the regulation. Are there any comments from board members at this time? Any public comments from the audience? Jason, any public comment?
No public comment.
Oh, thank you. We do have a motion and a second. Heather, would you please call the roll?
I think if Mr. Ruane, if nobody minds, I think we do need the motion from your script to be read, and then we will move from there on the approval and the roll call.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. I'll read the staff recommendation, and then I'll ask for board member comment and public comment. Staff recommendation is as follows. Because no adverse comments were received during the 45-day comment period, authorize the registrar to adopt the proposed regulations at Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 832, Specialty Contractors Classified, and 832.49, C49, Tree and Palm Contractor, as filed with the Office of Administrative Law for public notice. Take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking process and make any non-substantive changes to the text and or rulemaking package as needed through the process. Is that the motion that was made?
That's what I meant, yes.
Okay. And the seconder? Yes. Okay. We have no board comment or public comment at this time. Heather, would you please call the roll?
Susan Granzella.
Aye.
Kevin Albanese.
Aye.
Frank Altamara.
Yes.
Rodney Kobos.
Aye.
David Delatorre has an excused absence. Miguel Galarza.
Aye.
Donald Garatano.
Aye.
Diana Love. Michael Mark.
Aye.
James Ruane.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Yes.
Mary Tykert.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Our next item, B, is on page 26 of your packets. Review, discussion, and possible action to adopt Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 825.5, C47, General Manufactured Housing Contractor Initial Installer Training Requirement. This item relates to the regulatory rulemaking the board authorized staff to commence in July of 2020, the creation of an additional application requirement for C47 manufactured housing contractors, which is being done to ensure CSLB complies with federal law. Chief Jimnetsky will explain why this item is here. Mike?
This item is quite similar to what we just did. It's the exact same issue. We use the word initiate in the original motion, and we'd like to permission to complete the process. Otherwise, the regulatory language that the board approved is not changing.
All right, thank you, Mike. And before a motion is made, I'll read the staff recommendation first. Because no adverse comments were received during the 45-day comment period, authorize the registrar to adopt the proposed regulation at Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 825.5, C47, General Manufactured Housing Contractor Initial Installer Training Requirement, as filed with the Office of Administrative Law for public notice. take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking process, and make any non-substantive changes to the text and or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process. Any board member comments?
Make a motion to accept staff recommendation.
Let's see first if there's any public comment from the audience. None, seeing none. Jason, anything from the public?
Just a reminder for the public to press *3 if you'd like to make a comment.
Jason stepped out to try to address the background noise.
All right, so we don't have anything from the audience, from the board, or from public. At this time, is there a motion and a second?
Make a motion to accept the staff recommendation.
Was there a second? Yes?
Second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Any board comment on the question? Any public comment from the audience or from the public?
No public comment?
All right. Heather, would you please call the roll?
Susan Granzella.
Aye.
Kevin Albanese.
Aye.
Frank Altamura.
Aye.
Rodney Kobos.
Aye.
David Delatorre has an excused absence. Miguel Galarza.
Aye.
Donald Garatano.
Aye.
Diana Love. Michael Mark. James Ruane.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson. Nancy Springer.
Yes.
And Mary Teichert.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Our next item, C, is on page 28 of your packets. Review, discussion, and possible action to initiate a rulemaking to amend and or make non-substantive Rule 100 changes to Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 858.1, Blanket Performance and Payment Bond Requirements, and 858.2, Application for Approval of Blanket Performance and Payment Bond. This item relates to a regulatory rulemaking the board authorized staff to commence in 2017, before I was on the board and likely before some of you were on as well. The board's 2017 motion included proposed changes to other regulations were already completed separately or will be discussed under the next agenda item. For that reason and other reasons that Chief Jimnetsky will explain, the board is being asked to consider this item again. Chief?
Yes, so this item is primarily here just because of that 2017 motion that authorized staff to move forward on a number of regulatory changes, and that motion we just need to deal with. It's on the books, it's on our OAL calendar. So this item here today will resolve that. What I want to say first is that this is about the blanket and performance bond. A lot of people know what that is, but some don't. And just to keep it simple and straightforward, if contractors have a blanket and performance bond on a home improvement contract, they can accept more than the 10% down or the $1,000 cap. So big companies like Home Depot have these bonds. There are 10 regulations dealing with blanket and performance bonds, and we're just talking about 2 here because this is actually what staff is regarding as a pretty simple change to the law, and we'll walk through it together. But the reason the 2017 motion didn't move forward, as the packet explains, is because we had other regulatory priorities at the time, but also, some of you may remember, a bill came out in 2018 that affected how the board defines a crime for the purposes of license history. And because of that bill, a number of the regulatory sections that motion was going to deal with got dealt with separately under different rulemaking. So this one kind of just got left hanging. We're here to deal with it today. The changes are not drastic. Let's look at page 31. This is a form that contractors use to get their bond on file, and we put in color the changes that we're making. At the bottom of 31, a lot of stakeholders have had questions about what that language meant. These blue underlines clarify what that language means. It's clarifying that we're talking about we're talking about home improvement contracts. That's what this language does. It didn't clarify that before. On page 32, believe it or not, this form didn't actually have a location to put the amount of the bond. So we're putting an amendment here that would allow people to put the amount of the bond. And then you'll see another blue, there's other simple changes. The last major change is on page 35. I'm not going to say major because a bill compelled this change. If you'll see on page 35, the word 5 is struck out and replaced with the word 2. That's because the legislature a few years ago decided that to qualify for one of these bonds, the licensee only has to have been a licensee for 2 years instead of 5. So we have to change our regulation. And that's all that is happening with this blanket and performance bond request. Now, the motion is very long. And the reason for that is because we're hoping to do this change through what we call a Section 100 in regulatory rulemaking. And all that is it's a rule that allows staff to move forward. If the changes are not significant enough to require notice and public hearing, staff can move forward and get the changes done. Just in case we move forward and the attorneys think that we can't get it done under a Section 100, this motion covers us doing the regular rulemaking. But it also does one more thing. It covers us to proceed with the rulemaking and not do what we just did for the first 2 items, which is initiate rulemaking and then come back to you to request to finalize it if no public comments are made. So we can do it all in one if this motion is approved. And so that's why it's so long. Are there any questions about this? That's it.
Thank you, Mike. The staff recommendation is as follows. Withdraw the 2017 motion in relation to CCR sections 858.1 and 858.2 and approve a new motion for this rulemaking proposal. Approve the proposed regulatory text for CCR section 858.1 and 858.2. Authorize the registrar to take all steps necessary to pursue the rulemaking through the CCR section 100 procedures and make any non-substantive changes to the text and/or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process. Alternatively, if deemed necessary by the Department of Consumer Affairs or the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, initiate the regular rulemaking process, making any non-substantive changes to the text and/or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process. And if approved by the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, set the matter for a hearing if preferred or requested. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period, authorize the registrar to adopt the proposed regulations at CCR sections 858.1 and 858.2 as filed with the Office of Administrative Law for public notice and take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking process, making any non-substantive changes to the text and/or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process. Any comments from board members? Anything from the public?
If you would like to make a public comment on the phone, please press star 3.
Motion to adopt the recommendation.
Second.
A motion is second. Any thing on the question for board comment? Any comments from the audience? Seeing none. And Jason, I'm assuming we have no one from the public?
No public
Thank
comments.
you. Heather, will you please call the roll?
Susan Granzella. Kevin Albanese. Frank Altamira.
Aye.
Rodney Kobos. Miguel Galarza.
Aye.
Donald Garatano. Diana Lev. Michael Mark. James Ruane.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson. Nancy Springer.
Yes.
Mary Tykert. Motion carries.
Thank you, Heather. Next item D is on page 36 of your packets. D, review, discussion, and possible action to initiate a rulemaking to amend Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 872, Disclosure of General Liability Insurance, and repeal Section 872.1, checklist for homeowners and/or make non-substantive Rule 100 changes to Section 872, Disclosure of General Liability Insurance, and 872.1. This agenda item also arises out of the same 2017 board motion that we just discussed in the previous agenda item. Chief will explain why the board is being asked to consider this item again. You're up, Chief.
So same deal with this one regarding that 2017 motion. We have to address that motion and renew it. This request is happening because the statutes that provided authority for the regulation 872. And all of 872.1 is gone. So a portion of the statute that authorized, so on page 38, this regulation is no longer in effect. It required CSLB to provide a disclosure form. The law used to provide, and I apologize, I'm getting my bearings here. The law used to require CSLB to provide a form that contractors could use in their contracts that makes a disclosure about general liability insurance. The law changed many years ago to remove that requirement, and instead it requires the contractors to provide that form. As a result, CSLB no longer has this form in its regulations. But this is also happening because in 2011, and again, we're talking a long time ago, 2011, we began licensing LLC companies. Licensed contractors do not have to have commercial general liability insurance unless they are an LLC. So when we started licensing LLCs, this form is no longer valid because it doesn't discuss the requirement that LLCs must have commercial general liability insurance as a condition of licensing. So these are very technical changes to the law that we're trying to fix. The motion is long, again, because we're not sure yet if this will be approved as a Section 100. Staff can make the changes because they're not considered major or significant enough to go through the notice and hearing process, or the motion covers us to go through the regulatory process to make the changes. You'll see that we're changing the form on page 40 and 41 to clarify these commercial general liabilities requirements, to clarify that limited liability companies must have commercial general liability insurance. That was all Regulation 872. 872.1, the law that required this is completely gone. If you look at page 43, it talks about requiring a written estimate in a bid. That was amended out of the law a long time ago, and it's time to remove this regulation. So that's why that is happening. That is the update, and the motion, again, is very similar to the last one. We're trying to put it all up front so we can approve staff moving forward in whatever direction all of the parties involved in this process think is best. And if there's no public comment and no changes that we need to make to this language, we won't have to bring it to the board again like we did with these other two items to finalize the process. We can just get it done. So that's the update.
Thank you, Mike. Staff recommendation is as follows. Withdraw the 2017 motion in relation to CCR Section 872 and approve a new motion for this rulemaking proposal. Approve the proposed regulatory text for CCR Section 872 and 872.1. Authorize the registrar to take all steps necessary to pursue the rulemaking through the CCR Section 100 procedures and make any non-substantive changes to the text and or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process. Alternatively, if deemed necessary by the Department of Consumer Affairs or the Business, Consumer Services and Housing Agency, initiate the regular rulemaking process, making any non-substantive changes to the text and or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process. And if approved by the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business, Consumer Services and Housing Agency, set the matter for a hearing if preferred or requested. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period, authorize the registrar to adopt the proposed regulations at CCR Sections 872 and 872.1 as filed with the Office of Administrative Law for public notice, and take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking process, making any non-substantive changes to the text and or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process. At this time, any comments from board members?
Yes, I have a question. I don't recall using Section 100 before, and so can you, is it new, or did we not use it, or is it now possible for us to use it? And what are the chances of these changes that we're voting on today of going through and being approved?
I am going to defer to our regulatory counsel, Danny Rogers.
Hi there. A Rule 100 has existed as an alternative means to a regular rulemaking, and it's a lot faster process for passing regulatory changes. OAL has 30 working days as opposed to requiring the board to go through a 45-day comment period. We do feel confident that based on the nature of the changes, which is to align it with a current statute, have a high probability of success, and it'll enable the process to be a lot quicker. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional comments from board members?
Yes, I have a question. For clarification purposes, as you said, indicated this is very long, but you made a comment that consumers will no longer get a written estimate. Is that correct?
That's correct. The statute, there was a statute, 7159.3, that was repealed. And that statute had a lot of things in it that was put into a later version of the home improvement contract requirements that provide a lot of protection for consumers. But as sometimes go with these statutes, and I don't know why this occurred, the sentence that required an estimate to be in writing was just removed from the law. And so that it is no longer right now required to have a written estimate in a home improvement contract.
Is there anything in place to protect the consumer?
On that issue alone, just a written estimate, there isn't anything that requires it right now. Dave, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think we only have two mics on at a time without the background. What protects the consumer, though, is a requirement that the contract itself be in writing and clearly describe the work that's going to be done, and it must be a fixed price with payments directly referenced to the work that will be completed. The estimate would not need to be in writing, and that's not been a consumer protection problem that we've encountered at the Contractors Board. As long as the contract's in writing and they get the 3 or 5 day right to rescind that contract if they have second thoughts.
I would also just note for the record, we're trying, the legislative division at CSLB is trying to wrap this up this year, but it's one of our strategic plan items to improve and clarify the home improvement contract requirements. There are a lot of requirements. They were amended over a bunch of years, and they're confusing and duplicative. And it's a big legislative proposal that we're working on to try to clear up some of the issues with that area of law. And then one comment I thought I'd add for Board Member Granzella, I don't know if this helps on the Section 100. I've always thought of it as, we talk in here a lot about omnibus bills in state statute, which are technical, non-clarifying changes to state statute that fix typos or clarify issues. I've always thought of the Section 100 as being sort of the administrative rulemaking aspect version of an omnibus bill. Do you think that analogy works?
Thank you, Mike. Any additional comments from board? Jason, anything from the public?
No public comments.
Thank you. At this time, is there a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
There is a motion and a second. Any additional board comment on the question? Anything from the public, Jason?
No public comments.
All right, thank you. Heather, please call the roll.
Susan Granzella. Aye. Kevin Albanese.
Yes.
Frank Altamura.
Aye.
Rodney Kobos. Aye. David Delatorre has an excused absence. Miguel Galarza.
Aye.
Donald Garatano.
Aye.
Diana Love. Aye. Michael Mark.
Aye.
James Ruin.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Yes.
Mary Tykert. Motion carries.
Thank you, Heather. And finally, our last legislative agenda for today is item E on page 46. Review, discussion, and possible action to initiate a rulemaking to amend and or make non-substantive Rule 100 changes to Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 884, Assessment of Civil Penalties. Unlike the previous 4 agenda items, this item relates to a rulemaking request that the board has not yet seen. A few minutes ago, we updated the board to the passage of AB 569 this year, a CSLB-sponsored bill which raised specified civil penalties. As a result of that bill, it is time to update the CSLB regulations accordingly. Chief, do you want to fill us in on that, please?
Yes, famous last words. This is really the most straightforward of the bunch. A bill was passed that changes our civil penalty fees, and as a result, those fees are all listed in regulation. We need to change the regulation. It's considered section 100 because it's just complying with the state statute. And if the board takes a look at pages 47, 48, and 49, you can see all the amounts that were changed by the statute. So we're just asking permission to get the rulemaking started to have the regulation comply with the statute that the governor signed, the board-sponsored bill. Thanks.
The staff recommendation is as follows. Approve the proposed regulatory text for CCR Section 884. Authorize the registrar to take all steps necessary to pursue the rulemaking through the CCR Section 100 procedures and make any non-substantive changes to the text and/or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process. Alternatively, if deemed necessary by the Department of Consumer Affairs or the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency, initiate the regular rulemaking process, making any non-substantive changes to the text and/or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process. And if approved by the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency, set the matter for a hearing if preferred or requested. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period, authorize the registrar to adopt the proposed regulations to CCR Section 884 as filed with the Office of Administrative Law for public notice and take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking process, making any non-substantive changes to the text and/or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process. Any board member comments? Anything from the public, Jason?
No public comments.
All right. At this time, is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any additional board comments on the question? Anything from the public, Jason?
No public comments.
All right. Heather, will you please call the roll?
Susan Granzella. Aye. Kevin Albanese. Aye. Frank Altamura.
Yes.
Rodney Kobos.
Aye.
David Delatorre has an excused absence. Miguel Galarza. Donald Garatano. Diana Love. Michael Mark. James Ruane.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson. Nancy Springer.
Yes.
Mary Tykert. Motion carries.
Thank you, Heather. And that concludes the Legislative Committee update.
Thank you, Mr. Rain. I believe you're hired, so, thank you for the presentation and to Mike. So, leading us through the licensing and testing portion of our meeting is Licensing Chair Licensing Chair Miguel Galarza. Miguel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Susan. My name is Miguel Galarza, and I am honored and to assume the role of the Licensing and Testing Committee. I can remember the anxiety of being a contractor or trying to be a contractor 30 years ago. And so this being able to chair this committee is quite exciting as my first assignment under the board. And so with that, I'd like to begin with talking about the statistical updates that we have that begin in our pamphlet on page 55. And with that, I would like to invite Chief Paddock to come up and actually not come up, but I ask him to waive his presentation today in the interest of time. However, I know Chief Paddock would be more than available to discuss any questions that the board would have regarding the statistical information that's provided in our handout. Are there any questions from the board regarding the statistics that we haven't overviewed? Hopefully you've had a chance to glance over. Jason, are there any public comments regarding the statistical information provided?
We have no public comments.
As there's no other action items on this item, I move to the next agenda item. Thank you, Chair. The next would
Actually,
be
Chair,
an update.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question. In the statistics, can you give us an update on the online renewals? That's, I see the stats are there, but, I mean, the bottom line is, are you pleased? Oh, did I say
Absolutely.
something wrong?
No, you did not say something wrong. Thankfully, our former public affairs chief texted us and said, we'll avoid the feedback if we get this thing away from that speaker, so that's why it moved us back. So Rick Lopes, thank you for watching today. So I'm very happy to report we are weeks away from the single qualifier renewal. I think right now our renewals are under 3 weeks. I want to basically tell you, moving forward in 2022, our renewals are always at 1 week. And this is just a reminder, anyone who has a single qualifier, so for most of you up there, it's okay. Mary will still have to do a paper renewal. But for most of our contractors with just one qualifier on record, you won't have to actually have staff process anything. You can do it automatically in your pajamas on a Saturday night. So if there's any other questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Moving on to our second agenda item, on page 73, we'll see that there are actually 2 surveys that were conducted, one on license applications and one on consumers and their filing of complaints in the Enforcement Division. Police, we should all be pleased at the positive numbers that have come based on the licensing applications and that report. The surveys that culminate the consumer filed complaints begins on page 82. And we can see there has been a significant drop in satisfactory numbers regarding consumer complaints. So with that, I would turn over to David to briefly speak on actions that CSLB may plan to do moving forward.
Well, thank you, Board Member Galarza. What I find interesting is that for a number of years, our complainant satisfaction has remained very steady, often just fluctuating 2 or 3 percentage points. But in the last year, you'll see almost a 15% drop. And I have met with staff and we've discussed why that likely occurred. And we believe it's because of the health pandemic. We stopped going out in the field. We stopped meeting with consumers in their homes to review complaints. We had to cut $7 million from our approved budget, and about $5 million came from the enforcement program, so they took a real hit. That reduced our, I would say restricted our ability to use our industry expert program. We referred fewer cases to arbitration, and we had to leave a lot of positions vacant. We're hoping though, we're optimistic that the governor will sign our fee bill, and then we can fully fund the enforcement program. And we can, we're also going to be going back out into the field. We have started to go back out in the field to perform site visits, to meet with consumers in person, and we believe we can turn that around and reduce that 15% drop to bring it back where it once was. I think if you compare the Contractors Board to other boards that also survey their complainants, we've been very high. We've had a high satisfaction rate, and it's because we do have a focus on working with the consumer and the industry to resolve construction complaints. Assuming the contractor is not somebody we need to move out of the marketplace, we seize every opportunity we can to settle the case. So that's really the background and why we believe it dropped 15%. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Board members, are there any comments you have regarding the 2 surveys presented today? Seeing none. Jason, do we have any public comment?
We have no public comments.
Hearing there's no public comments, and given that there are no further action items for the board, this concludes the portion of the Licensing and Testing Committee, and I move back to you, Susan.
Whoops, thank you, Miguel. We are now on the enforcement section of our agenda, and I turn it over to Enforcement Committee Chair Rodney Kobos.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Gonzalez. Enforcement Program Statistical Update. The Enforcement Program Statistical Overview can be found on page 101 of your board packet. I would like to quickly bring to your attention to the pending investigation section. As noted, as of July 2021, the pending caseload is 3,932, just shy of the optimum maximum caseload that can be handled timely with current staffing. The Enforcement Division bore much of the budget reduction burden and currently has 19 total vacancies, including 5 consumer service representatives, CSRs, and 7 special investigators. Upon budget approval, The Enforcement Division plans to commence hiring with an initial focus on the recruitment of CSRs. This is an informational item only. No action is required of the board. Any comments from board members? Jason, is there any public comment?
We have no public comments.
Thank you. That concludes the Enforcement Committee update.
Thank you, Rodney. We are zipping along here. Next, on to the executive portion of the agenda. It will be, first is the review and possible approval of the June 3rd, 2021 board minutes, which begin on page 109. May I have a motion to accept the board minutes?
So moved.
Second.
I just have one amendment.
For election of officers. Yeah, 115.
What about public affairs?
So on page 116, it shows that I voted twice. I believe I just abstained, so that was just the only thing.
All right, thank you. So we'll ask for a motion with that amendment, that change.
So moved.
Good. Heather, please take the roll call.
Susan Granzella. Kevin Albanese. Frank Altamura.
Aye.
Rodney Cobos. Miguel Galarza. Donald Garatano. Diana Love. Michael Mark. James Ruane.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson. Nancy Springer.
Yes.
Mary Tykert. Motion passes.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask for a motion to approve the July 17th, 2021 board meeting minutes.
So moved.
It's the July,
27.
oh, it was, you're right. I had on here, it was wrong. So it's July, so do I have a motion to approve the July 27, 2021 board minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Heather, please take a roll call.
Susan Granzella. Kevin Albanese. Frank Altamura.
Yes.
Rodney Cobos.
Aye.
David Delatorre has an excused absence. Miguel Galarza. Donald Garatano. Diana Love. Michael Mark. James Ruane.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson. Nancy Springer. Mary Tykert. Motion carries.
Thank you. Is there any comment from board members? Any public comment?
We have no public comments.
Thank you. I think I did that out of order, didn't I? All right, next we will review and possibly approve the July, no, that's already, we did that. The 27th. Next is a registrar's report, which includes an update on the tentative board meeting schedule, an update on regarding battery energy storage system outreach, and discussion on the new programs proposed by the National Association of State Contractors Licensing Agencies. David, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. This is what we consider a quarterly, regularly scheduled board meeting. We have to have 4 of these a year. Our next quarterly board meeting is tentatively scheduled for approximately the second week of December. We'll be sending out a survey to all of you to gauge your availability. And when we do that, we're going to ask if you would like for that meeting to be in person or virtual. So I really welcome your feedback on whether or not you thought the meeting today in person was beneficial, and we should consider that for December. Prior to that meeting, we may well have a closed door session that'll be discussed, and also there may be committee meetings depending on the need. So my next item was the battery energy storage system outreach. I know all of the board members received an update regarding the workshop that we had last Friday. It was very well attended. We had we actually had 133 attendees at one point. And a lot of good questions were posed. We were able to provide answers. We provided clarification that the board's motion regarding the C-46 had no impact on the general building contractor's ability to continue to build homes. They can do the electrical in the home, doesn't impact them, it doesn't impact the C-46 doing solar. What we do have is a frequently asked question, or a fact sheet, if you will, industry bulletin that's currently on the CSLB website. Based on that meeting and information that I received this morning from one of the public speakers, we'll be further clarifying the rules so everybody understands what they are. And there was a real interest in having another workshop where we would include DLSC, used to be the Division of Apprenticeship Standards that oversaw the Department of Industrial Relations Electrician Certification Program. And now it's under Division of Labor Standards Enforcement. And what I plan to do is schedule another workshop where we'll have DLSC representatives in person or present so that they can explain the electrician certification requirement and how contractors can develop their workforce to qualify and pass the electrician certification exam. So we're real excited about that. And the next item I had was the National Association of State Contractors Licensing Agencies, or the acronym is NASCLA. Our board has been a member of NASCLA for many years. In fact, we were one of the founding members in 1962. And I serve on a number of committees with NASCLA, and after discussing this with Chair Granzella, I did offer to serve as a pilot state in the development of a database that would, one, track licenses throughout the country, ideally, but also the disciplinary action. One thing that California's done has been on the forefront with NASCLA in providing information relating to contractors that are revoked. In turn, we've asked other states to provide information to us so that when an application is received, we can make an informed decision. So I'm personally very excited about that. I do think there are very bad contractors out there that do cross state lines, and we should all be aware of who they are so that we can preclude them from obtaining a license. And I'll keep you all posted. I guess the good news, too, is that NASCLA dedicated $120,000 to provide any IT needs. So it should be a minimal resource issue for our board to participate in this. And hopefully it'll work and it'll expand to other states. And that would be my update. Is there any questions?
Next on the agenda is our favorite topic, the budget update. We will move on to, it begins on page 153 in your board packet, and Stacy, please provide us with an update.
Good morning, and thank you, Board Chair. So on page 153 begins your budget update, and I'm just giving you the final numbers from last fiscal year. So the first chart shows our year-end budget and expenses. We did an amazing job by reducing expenses while still having enough cash flow to continue operations. Year end, we spent $65 million, which is 92% of our budget. The chart directly below is our final year-end revenue. As you can see, we ended with $73 million, which is 13.4% more than prior year. So we did really good. If you flip the page, you'll see this is our governor's budget for this fiscal year. This shows our budget at $73 million, and we're authorized at 430 positions. The main budget change over last year is $3.5 million, and that is due to the personal services budget, which is basically giving back the staff pay that we were cut from last fiscal year. On the next page is page 155 is our fund condition. This projects out to 22-23. The first column shows the year end. At the bottom, you can see we ended the year with $3.7 million in reserves. The next column is current year, showing us maintaining similar cost-saving measures that you all approved of $5 million. This will help us from dipping too much into our reserves. But as you can see, it isn't maintainable long-term without a fee increase, as we would end 22-23 in the red. And if you flip the page, this chart was the board-approved $7.1 million in expense reductions from last year. The column on the right is the blue, reflects the savings through year end. And you can see we exceeded the goal of the $7.1 million, and our final savings was $10.5 million. So we did really well. So I just want to thank for the support of the board, as well as our amazing staff for working together. We definitely were able to identify those expenses that we could postpone and just reduce, ultimately keeping us from going into the red, especially since during such a difficult time, this was an amazing accomplishment. The last 4 pages are the statistical summary, which detail by month. And basically from last board meeting, there's no big differences. We knew that, new applications were down because we couldn't test, and our renewals were up and kind of helped us maintain our revenue coming in. So this concludes the budget update, unless anyone has any questions.
Any comment from board members?
Yeah. May I? So the projected revenue number for 22-23, that does not include the potential of a fee increase. That's based upon current fees?
Correct.
And can you remind us what we think annually those fee increases are going to add to revenue?
$20 million.
Gotcha. And just one comment, if I may. I think our staff did an absolutely fantastic job. Given the budget constraints that we ran into a couple years ago and some of the external costs and whatnot, but we see it from the surveys, and we also know how much in demand our team is, especially on the enforcement side that's out there. So as much as we've done a fantastic job, and my hat's off to staff, my hat's off to the leadership of the board, Dave, Tanya, everybody involved. It's going to be really good to get those coffers back and get our enforcement teams out there dealing with the public. So thank you. Great job.
Actually, I have a question. The reduction that was put in place during the pandemic on staff, all state employees, when does that come back? How does that impact the budget? Is it a credit in the future? Because I'm sure it was substantial. It was 9%. So can you elaborate?
So we already got that back. So what happened on the DCA side is they cut our budget last fiscal year. When that 9% was implemented. So they cut our budget. It was roughly $4 million. And then, so when they were building the budget for this fiscal year, they added that back in. So that's why our budget, if you notice, last fiscal year was $70 million, and this year is going to be $73 million.
Thank you. Is there any public comment?
We have no public comments.
All right, as there's no action required of the board, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Next is the administration program update, which begins on page 163. In the interest of time, we will not be making a presentation, but Tanya Corcoran is always available. Should we put your cell number in here? Yeah, always available to answer questions on our administration update. Thank you. Is there any comment from board members? Any public comment?
No public comments.
Thank you. As there's no action required of the board, we'll move on. Next is information technology update. Next, please turn to page 169 on your board packet for the information technology update. Jason Perez, who is also manning our donation phone line during our fundraiser, but he has so gallantly going above and beyond, I shall say, and you will have, it's on page 169 if anyone has any comments. Any board comments? All right, and any public? Yeah.
We have no public comments.
All right, as there is no action required of the board, I'm now going to call a 10-minute recess so staff can reconfigure this room for our strategic planning item. They have asked that we all head outside for a few minutes so that they can set up quickly. Please return to this room in 10 minutes, and that would be 10:55. And look for your nameplate when you come back. Thank you.